While most 8-year-olds were learning to write cursive or chasing soccer balls at recess, Leah moved through the world in quiet focus. Her days were spent in near silence, fixing broken radios, sketching crude electrical diagrams in a weathered notebook, and riding the city bus alongside her mother. Her mom worked nights as an office cleaner at Virion Technologies, a powerful and secretive tech firm nestled in the glass and metal heart of the city. No one at the company knew Leah existed. No teachers took roll call with her name. No coworkers asked, "Who's that girl in the lobby?" She was invisible, and to her that felt safer than being seen. But one ordinary morning the entire building fell under siege, not by protest or storm, but by silence. A digital blackout, every screen dead, every system frozen, chaos erupted, and somehow only Leah understood what it meant. Not the engineers in sleek labs, not the executives in fur suits. Leah, an overlooked child with no badge, no title, recognized the language of the malfunction. Because she'd seen it before, because she'd built something like it before. That was the day a child forgotten by the world stepped forward and changed it. Leah always walked 6 steps behind her mother. Not because she had to. She just liked watching how her mother moved through spaces that didn't belong to them. Her mother was steady, quiet, unflinching, never hurrying, never looking up, never inviting attention in those glossy corridors of marble and LED light. She made herself small, but Leah understood that being unnoticed was a kind of armor. In places where they weren't meant to exist, invisibility could be its own kind of power. Leah clutched her frayed backpack tightly, always careful not to let the zipper snag on her hoodie. Inside the bag were her treasures, a spiral notebook packed with scribbles, a broken digital watch, and a scratched USB drive that hadn't lit up in years. She didn't care that it no longer worked. Some things you just don't throw away. They entered through the employee side door like ghosts. The security guard never asked questions, never even glanced at Leah. Her mother murmured one number, 39. That meant same shift, same floor. Nothing more needed to be said. Leah dropped her bag beside the same worn couch in the far corner of the lobby. Her legs swung softly as she sat, the only sign of her youth in a space designed for silence. Then came her favorite part of the day, pretending she belonged. As her mother disappeared into the service elevator, Leah opened her notebook and dove back into her world. She began sketching a prototype, a motherboard that could speak to her phone through air, not wires. The pencil in her hand moved with purpose, led by patterns only she could see. Around her, heels clicked, tablets snapped shut, voices murmured about meetings, but none of it touched her. In her mind, the circuitry lit up, connecting signal to signal, theory to possibility. She wasn't just drawing wires, she was drawing hope. Her designs included strange symbols, personal ciphers, numbers braided into letters, alphabets no one taught her. Somewhere in her mind, the ghost of a forgotten YouTube video flickered, one she watched secretly, once, maybe years ago. She didn't remember the details, but the idea still haunted her. A machine that could decode chaos. And then, just as she was narrating to herself about how her imaginary device would jaw open its signal gate, everything flickered. The lights above dimmed for half a second, then went dark. Leah froze, her pencil hovering mid-stroke. Around her, the mood shifted instantly. The subtle hum of electronics fell away, screens went black, like eyes closing all at once. At first, no one screamed, they whispered, then they murmured louder. Phones were yanked out of bags, fingers tapped frantically, tablets refused to wait. Panic bloomed. A voice barked, "It's the system." Another hissed, "We've been breached." A man slammed his tablet on the counter, his voice cracking with alarm. "You mean we're locked out?" A woman ran past, mumbling about the remote access key, not responding. Leah didn't know who the sharp-sighted woman near the elevator was, but her voice sliced through the chaos like a knife. She spoke with crisp authority, the kind that made people stop mid-sentence and listen, without ever asking who she was. The building, once pristine and humming with corporate confidence, now trembled under the weight of uncertainty. But Leah didn't move. She knew better than to draw attention to herself. Once you were noticed, people remembered to ask why you were there and told you to leave. So she stayed still, eyes wide, observing everything. Near the elevator, a group of panicked engineers devolved into finger-pointing and technical jargon. Someone muttered about nuclear overrides. Another barked something about malware vectors. That word malware, Leia recognized. She had seen simulations, overheard techs running attack drills on mock systems. She didn't understand every layer of infrastructure, but she could read their panic better than their words. The way they spoke over each other, clashing terms, glitchy logic, it told her more than they meant to say. Then came a quiet voice near the desk. "This can't happen, not today." Leah looked up at the massive screen above the reception counter. Still black, still blank. Her brows drew together. What was today? A young man with gelled hair and a too-big blazer paced by the windows, muttering into his phone. "It's gonna kill us. This is our biggest client pitch of the year. We're screwed." Leah jotted that down beside her latest circuit sketch. Client pitch. Today? It felt like a clue. They weren't reacting like this was just an accident. Something had been targeted. She listened harder. Someone tried restarting the local servers. Nothing changed. Another said they pinged external DNS. No response. Still locked. Leah tapped her pencil softly on her notebook. No one seemed to understand the why. They were just pulling levers, opening the same doors and finding them bolted shut. Leia turned to a fresh page. This time, she didn't sketch. She wrote steps. Step 1. Isolate the breach, internal or external. Step 2. Initiate a shell diagnostic. Look for anomalies in traffic patterns. She wasn't sure she could fix it, but one thing she knew for certain: they couldn't. That realization hit deeper than she expected. All these adults in expensive shoes, carrying powerful titles and million-dollar tools, lost. And her? An 8-year-old with a notebook and a head full of borrowed code, wasn't. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something heavier, something hotter. Like watching the moment a match catches paper. You didn't mean to start a fire, but now you can't stop it. Leah remembered the time her cousin nearly wiped their TV's settings, trying to plug in a busted hard drive. She had stepped in quietly, inserted her patched USB, and rebooted the system. No one had taught her. She had just figured it out. And now, standing in a room full of experts, she saw the same problem. A system frozen. A map without a guide. No one knew where to begin, but she did. She glanced down at her notes again. This time the symbols started to mean something. Her mind was building a reverse blueprint, not from code, but from chaos. She gripped her pencil tight. She hadn't planned on being here, but something in her said she was supposed to be. From above, a soft alarm pulsed through the floor. Not a threat, just a warning. Leah barely noticed. She was writing faster now, connecting overheard terms to concepts in her mind. Kernel-level lockout, access denial, non-destructive lockdown. This wasn't a wipeout, this wasn't a virus, this was a cage. Someone had locked the system from the inside. That meant something big. No data corruption, no system crash. The framework still existed, buried, waiting. If you knew where to look, you could still get in. Leah exhaled slowly. No fear, only the sensation she had when she cracked open a neighbor's discarded PC for the first time. Everyone said it was junk, but inside it still worked. All it needed was time, a screwdriver, and no one watching over her shoulder. Now, as the chaos unfolded like a storm of lost voices and flashing lights, Leah's eyes sharpened. She knew this feeling, she knew this code, even if she hadn't written it. Never in her life had she seen so many important people so clearly out of their depth. Inside a glass-walled conference room near the main staircase, the company's best and brightest gathered, shouting, pacing, pleading into dead phones. Wrinkled hoodies stood beside $1,000 suits. Every screen blinked red, a digital heart attack. One monitor flickered to a world map, but the only color left was crimson, bleeding across continents. Leah stepped closer. Her old sneakers barely made a sound. Leah moved silently across the brick-tiled floor, clutching her notebook like a shield. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning the faces of men and women who were supposed to have all the answers. Some shouted, others whispered in barely contained panic. Near the front of the room, a heavy-set man slammed his palm on the conference table. "This cannot be an internal breach," he barked. "We reinforced 3 layers of firewalls after Zurich." A woman beside him responded coldly. "Then it's ghost protocol, behavioral mimicry, too clean to be brute force." Leah didn't understand every word, but she knew what was missing. They weren't asking the right questions. The room vibrated with tension, but underneath it all was chaos. She watched as one tech tried to override the system manually. His fingers danced across the keyboard, but the monitor spat out rejection after rejection. "Blocked again," he muttered. "Level 4 encryption ring." Another voice cut in. "Who the hell built this?" "Someone who wants us offline," someone else whispered. A man older than the others, loud, confident, and clearly used to being the loudest voice in any room, called out toward the open door. "Can we get Marcus on the line? We need executive override." An assistant stammered. "He was in the conference room upstairs, but now we're not sure." Leah said nothing, but she could see it in their eyes. Whatever happened had moved faster than their control, and for the first time she forgot to stay hidden. She took half a step forward, barely breathing, and the words slipped out of her mouth before her fear could catch them. "Have you checked the outlet overflow loop?" Silence. Like a stone dropped in still water, her voice rippled across the room. A man scoffed. "What did she say?" Another rolled his eyes. "God, who let a kid in here?" But one woman blinked slowly. She didn't laugh, didn't interrupt. She just stared at Leah as if weighing something. Leah's cheeks flamed. Her stomach twisted with instant regret. She'd broken her own rule. Don't speak. Don't be seen. In her mind, she could already see her mother's horrified face if anyone realized Leah had said anything. She gripped her notebook tighter, ready to melt away like smoke. But just before she could disappear, she noticed someone watching her, not with irritation, but with something else. Curiosity. He was younger than the others, standing slightly back from the main group, maybe only a few years older than a high school senior. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't typing, he was observing. His name tag read Elias. Leah glanced at him, then quickly looked away, but not before she caught the tilt of his head. He was turning her words over in his mind. He didn't dismiss them, he tried to understand. In Leah's chest, something twisted, fear, hope, or maybe both. Because what she'd said wasn't a guess. She had seen that kind of overflow loop before, in a backdoor simulation from a pirated program she'd hacked into late one night. Sitting on a cracked tile floor, an old keyboard in her lap, in a neighbor's basement where no one paid attention. This wasn't theory to her, it was memory. In the glass room, a man muttered darkly, "We're throwing darts in the dark." "None of the tailgate patches are holding," another added. "We don't even know what we're facing. Marcus isn't responding." "We'll see the fallout when investor dashboards crash," someone growled. "He's gonna explode." But Leah wasn't afraid. Not of them. Not anymore. What scared her more was how wrong they were. Lost in wild theories, while the system itself was whispering truths they couldn't hear. This wasn't brute force. It wasn't loud. It was graceful, like a ghost that knew every inch of their protocol. Something embedded, something evasive, something elegant. Something written by someone who understood the system better than they did. And Leah, she felt it in her bones. The curse of teaching yourself is that you don't always have the words to explain what you know by instinct. Her mouth opened again, but this time nothing came out. Inside the glass-walled chaos, factions had started forming. Some people demanded action, others feared making it worse. The woman who had blinked slowly before now finally spoke. "We should at least check what she said." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room with steady confidence. Another man barked, defensive. "We're really taking cues from a child now?" That's when Elias stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just said, "Her question makes sense. Again heads turned. It's a plausible access point for a recursive lock command, he continued, especially if someone wanted it to look like user error. He glanced at Leah, then back at the room. Let's not pretend anyone here has a better theory. Silence settled again, but this time it was different. Leah swallowed. She didn't understand office politics, but she understood that look in Elias's eyes. It wasn't charity, it wasn't pity. It was belief. Not total trust, but something like it. She had crossed the threshold. Whether they liked it or not, she wasn't invisible anymore. She stepped back, unsure if she'd helped or made things worse. The men in suits were still skeptical, the engineers still jittery. But something in the room had changed. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. For the first time, someone had made them pause. And in that pause, something shifted. Leah slipped into the hallway and ducked behind a pillar. From there she watched as Elias remained still, his gaze fixed on her, not in suspicion, but in interest. The chaos buzzed around him again, but he didn't move. He watched her retreat, not as a child, but as a variable the system hadn't accounted for, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing all along. Leah sat on the cold floor just outside the room and opened her notebook. With swift strokes she wrote 3 words: outlet, overflow loop. If they wouldn't check it, she would. This wasn't a guess, it was recall. They hadn't let her in because they believed in her. They let her in because they were out of options. Not a decision made from logic, not from trust. It was the weariness of people who had failed too many times. The head of IT, a lanky, balding man with a sarcastic smirk, murmured, "Why not? Maybe the janitor's kid can fix what the whole department can't." Laughter rippled across the glass room, dry and nervous. It didn't reach anyone's eyes. No one stopped her, no one expected anything. Except Elias. The quiet trainee with eyes like sonar stepped forward. He didn't say much after defending her earlier, but now he pulled out a chair gently. "Hey," Elias said gently, barely above a whisper. "You might need to stand, the terminal's too high." Leah nodded once, then hugged her notebook tight against her chest like armor. Thin protection for someone who'd learned to face laughter without flinching. She stepped forward with the quiet grace of someone who had long practiced how not to be small. No one gave her advice, no one explained what she was walking into. She didn't ask. For 10 full seconds, Leah stood still in front of the console, her eyes scanning it without touching a single key. Her fingers hovered, not out of fear but calibration. She wasn't hesitating. She was aligning her mind with the layout of a system she already knew in muscle memory. The screen was a mess of locked administrative prompts, firewall rejects, and frozen diagnostic windows. She exhaled sharply through her nose. She saw enough of the shell interface to know that someone had already tried at least 3 different backdoor protocols, and all of them had failed. That meant the breach hadn't come by force. It was personal. Threaded into the system like silk, designed to slip through undetected. Leah's gaze shifted, not to the screen, but to the wall just beyond it. A shelf. On it, a photo frame tilted slightly to one side. In it, a little girl, no older than 5, grinned wildly from atop someone's shoulders. The man's face had been cropped out, but the watch on his wrist matched the one worn by the CEO who'd stormed into the lobby earlier. At the base of the frame, an engraving, Amelia. AM, welcome to the world. Leah smiled faintly, just once. Then she typed the name, Amelia. The response was immediate. No alarms, no flashing lights, no countdowns, just a subtle blink. A tiny reminder window appeared, tucked into a corner no one had ever noticed before. Elias, looking over her shoulder, leaned forward. He started to speak, then stopped. The head of IT, who had been scrolling through his phone with visible disdain, looked up. Ben froze. "Wait. What is that?" Leah didn't answer. She was already typing again, her movements calm, practiced, familiar. Not learning. Remembering. Her notes lay untouched beside her. She didn't need them. This wasn't guesswork. It was motion, flow, precision. One of the engineers leaned closer. "It override key." He murmured, "We never even tried user-specific contingencies." Another replied, "Do we have user-specific contingencies in the admin system?" No one could answer. Leah continued without pause. She didn't gloat, didn't even seem aware of the audience behind her. Her rhythm was quiet, steady, like she was following music only she could hear. And slowly, the room's tension changed. It wasn't helplessness anymore. It was disbelief. 12 adults with degrees and clearances stood silent as a child walked through the labyrinth they'd built, but could no longer navigate. No one dared speak. Only the gentle tapping of Leah's fingers and the soft whirring of the terminal fan filled the air. The same woman who had defended her earlier stepped closer and whispered, "She's already inside the administrative shell." The IT leader blinked, stunned. "This shell's invisible without proper authentication." Elias nodded, still watching. "Because she is authenticated." A voice behind them whispered, "She used the CEO's personal password manually." Silence deepened, heavy-loaded. No one said the thing they were all thinking. The vulnerability had been human all along. The father named his daughter at M and let that moment follow him into everything, including his password. Leah had found it, not out of luck, but from understanding. She had seen enough locked doors in her life to recognize one that wasn't meant to stay shut. Elias broke the silence again. He crouched beside her, not to take over, but to join her. "I've got cover on the logs," he said, quietly. "What are you looking for now?" Leah didn't look at him, but she answered. "The first loop." Her voice was clear, steady. "If I find the loop signature, I can reverse the lockout." Her hands never slowed. She swam through corrupted entries and hidden traps, some made to look harmless, others designed to waste time. She dodged every one of them like she was born to do it. No class had taught her, no teacher had handed her a guide. Her education had come from busted radios, salvaged junk, and sleepless nights with borrowed machines. And now, she was doing what none of them could. The room stood behind her, silent, watchful, as the child dismantled layer after layer of failure that they had built with the best of intentions and the worst of assumptions. What started as a joke, the janitor's daughter at the controls, was no longer funny. That spark of disbelief had become something colder, something scarier. The truth. When Leah breached the first layer of code, the lock screen fell away. New access fields appeared. The red static overlay faded from the central screen. No one laughed anymore. News traveled fast, faster than protocol, faster than approval. It skipped departments, slipped through whispers, coffee breaks, and glances passed between supervisors. "The janitor's kid is doing something to the system." It sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. And the wrong ears heard it. Marcus Vale, CEO of Virion Technologies, paced inside a private meeting room. His faded tablet screen had frozen mid-statistics. Around him, executives tried to salvage their crumbling investor call with corporate optimism and plastic smiles. Marcus wasn't listening. He tapped the screen again. Nothing. His eyes darkened. "Why is the system still down?" he snapped. His assistant, barely older than Elias, stuttered an explanation about encryption layers and protocol overrides, and then hesitated. "Sir, someone's working on it." Marcus narrowed his eyes. The assistant swallowed. "A girl in the lobby, I think she's the janitor's daughter." Marcus blinked, as if the words hadn't landed properly in his mind. He didn't speak, he didn't question it. He simply turned and walked out of the conference room, straight toward the chaos unfolding downstairs. A familiar fire stirred in his chest, not anger yet, but suspicion, sharp and cold like poison starting to circulate. Leah didn't know who Marcus Vale was. She didn't know he had arrived, or that, from behind the glass, the most powerful man in the company was watching her like a hawk, circling something it didn't understand. Her focus remained locked on the terminal. The broken journal entries unwound in her mind like old thread nuts she had been pulling at since early spring, Her lips were pressed into a line, her brow furrowed, her entire body leaned slightly forward, shaped by the habit of bending over scrap metal under flickering light. Her hands didn't tremble, not because she wasn't scared, but because she didn't have time to be. Every second wasted on fear was a second the system slipped further into collapse. She was already deep navigating blind through the third shell, relying on pattern recognition where diagnostic tools had failed. Half the interface had been disabled by the breach itself. Her notebook sat next to her, its pages rustling in the vibrations of nearby footsteps, but untouched. She didn't need it anymore. She didn't just understand the logic of the system, she was tracing the logic of the attacker. It wasn't just a breach. It was storytelling, a kind of language, and Leah spoke it like a second skin. Behind the glass, Marcus Vale crossed his arms, the skepticism in his eyes calcified into something colder. He saw her now, not just as a child, but as a disruption. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hoodie hung loose on her frame, her fingers moved like they belonged at the console, not on a jungle gym. Marcus turned to one of the engineers standing nearby. "Ensure security," he said flatly. The engineer stiffened. "Sir, she's just a kid." "And this," Marcus replied, "is multi-million-dollar infrastructure." His voice was calm, deadly calm. "I will not be held responsible for sabotage." He didn't have to raise his voice. His commands were followed like script, automatic, unquestioned. Within seconds, 2 building security officers approached. One muttered into a headset, the other scanned the room, eyes locking on Leah. The IT manager saw them first. His jaw tensed, his annoyance growing. Elias saw them next. Without thinking, Elias moved, stepping in front of Leah. He planted himself between her and the guards, like a firewall made of flesh and instinct. "She's the only one making progress," Elias said, louder than he meant to. His voice cracked the air like a live wire. One of the guards paused. The other looked back at Marcus, waiting for the signal. Marcus didn't speak. He watched Elias instead. He studied the boy's posture, his clenched fists, the way his legs shook even as he stood his ground. He was afraid, but not backing down. "You're telling me," Marcus said slowly, "that you've handed our critical recovery effort to an unlicensed, untrained, unauthorized child?" "I'm telling you," Elias replied, not blinking, "she's deeper inside the system than any of us have ever been, and she hasn't tripped a single safety protocol." Marcus didn't respond, but something flickered behind his eyes. Doubt? Curiosity? It was impossible to tell. Behind them, engineers murmured, "She's pulling up logs we couldn't reach." She found the irregularity in Cluster 2. She might actually be fixing it. Leah didn't hear any of it. She hadn't noticed the guards. She hadn't seen Elias step forward. She was deep inside the flaw decoding, injection patterns and reversing corrupted data paths meant to deceive and delay. This wasn't talent, it was clarity. The kind of clarity you earn after years of tinkering with broken things until patterns emerge from the fog. And the deeper she went, the more certain she became. This breach wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was intentional, it was elegant. Leah could feel the human behind the code. Someone smart, someone angry. Someone who had woven their grudge into the infrastructure, like a hidden narrative waiting to be read. And Leah followed it, breadcrumb by breadcrumb. Her pulse hammered in her ears, but her face never flinched. This wasn't just a puzzle, it was a message. Somewhere behind her, someone whispered, "She's breaking another layer." "Need," someone else said under their breath. More people edged closer. Even the IT manager who had mocked her earlier now stood in cautious awe. Leah didn't notice. Her mind was consumed by binary. Her heart beat in time with logic. She had passed beyond doubt, beyond distraction. She didn't need permission, because she was already inside. Her fingers moved with instinct. She had tunneled through 3 security layers, and what she saw wasn't noise. It was craft. This wasn't the reckless splatter of a script kiddie. It was methodical, purposeful. a work of bitter genius meant to be found, but only by someone who knew how to listen between the lines. Leah leaned closer. The code no longer looked like a wall, it looked like a dialect. Dangerous, dense, but strangely beautiful. Rogue loops carried payload. Recursive traps disguised themselves as vital functions. Every turn simulated logic so precisely, even seasoned engineers would fall into digital dead ends. But Leah didn't walk the paths meant for others. She moved sideways, off-grid, like she already knew the maze. Her breathing slowed. She wasn't just solving a breach anymore. She was uncovering a story. Malformed line of syntax caught her eye, not because it was wrong, but because it was familiar. Her heart stuttered, then surged. She had seen this before. The code wasn't copied, it had evolved, but the bones were the same. Leah remembered the night it first appeared. She'd been 12, alone at a dusty internet cafe across from her cousin's apartment. Her mom thought she was asleep in the back room. But Leah had stolen away with a cracked laptop and logged into a forgotten forum full of broken links and cryptic usernames. Most of it was junk. But one thread stood out. Digital Ghost, a method for breaking symmetry. No replies, just a dump file, and one cryptic comment. Not about breaking in, about being the door. She hadn't understood it all back then, but she'd copied it by hand into a notebook, line by line, then spent weeks rebuilding it on a salvaged PC, dissecting it like a puzzle. The version she was seeing now wasn't hers, but it was a descendant. Identical triggers, same error masks, even the variable names matched. This wasn't coincidence. To recondition a signature, her hands froze above the keyboard. The spell of logical perfection shattered, because now it was personal. She wasn't facing a stranger's virus. She was facing someone who had walked the same path as her. A lone, unseen self, taught. This wasn't just malicious code. It was a message from someone like her. That was a fingerprint. Not just code, not just corruption, a voice disguised in silence, speaking through sabotage. Hacker who had danced at the edges of forbidden territory. Someone who had once stared at the blinking cursor in a dark room, alone. No instructors, no classroom, no formal learning, only raw fire, frustration, and a mind that moved too fast for the world around it. Leah felt the floor of her stomach drop out beneath her. For the first time since the incident began, she didn't know whether to feel awe or fear. Because if someone like her had walked this same path and chosen destruction instead of discovery, then what did that say about her? Her entire life she had believed that her gift, this strange ability to read systems like stories, made her different for the better. But now, a darker question whispered in her ear. What if that gift made her dangerous too? She leaned back slightly, her hands trembling at last. Her thoughts tangled into a web of emotions she had no names for. There was no teacher to ask, no manual to explain what it meant to stare into the eyes of your enemy and see your reflection. Was this saboteur seeking revenge? Was it personal? Or was this just another test? A mind like hers but turned inside out? Breaking boundaries not out of malice but curiosity. Just to see where they would break? Leah's chest tightened. This wasn't chaos. It was cold, precise, patient. And that was far more terrifying than any random virus. Because whoever wrote this had been in control. Not lashing out in rage, but choosing every line with deliberate intention. She thought of the little girl in the photo frame, Amelia. What would have happened if she hadn't caught it in time? Would the attack have wiped entire systems, stolen identities, triggered lawsuits, or worse, passed unnoticed? Was it a mistake or a warning? For the first time since the breach began, Leah hesitated. She wondered if maybe she should stop. Let someone else finish it. Let the adults do what they were trained to do. But she knew something they didn't. She saw what they couldn't. When she recognized the trail, Elias noticed her change. He had given her space, knowing better than to interrupt. But now he leaned in. "Leah," he said gently. She didn't look up. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Did you find something?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "Yes," she said. "I think I know who built this." Elias blinked. "You mean a group?" She shook her head. "No, I mean someone like me." He didn't reply. He knew not to rush that silence. Some answers carry their own weight. Leah kept typing, slower now. She wasn't doubting the code. She understood it better than anyone here. But she understood what it meant. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a test. Someone had buried this flaw knowing only a certain kind of mind would be able to unearth it. Someone like her. That thought thrilled her and scared her to death. Because if they were out there, watching, waiting, what would they do when they realized they had a successor? But Leah didn't stop. Her hands trembled, her breath caught. But she kept going. She was digging deeper, line by line. And at the end of this path wasn't a bug. It was a mind just like hers. A mirror curved inward. A person who once looked at the world through numbers, through shadows, and chose to weaponize it. Leah didn't know who they were. She didn't know why they had done this. But she did know this. If someone like that existed, someone who had chosen chaos, then she had to choose something else. Not for Virion. Not for Marcus Vale. Not even for her mother. For herself. To prove there's another way. Her path. Another ending. Because the ghost inside this machine spoke her language. And she was ready to answer. When the system pulsed again, just a thin green line flickering across one of the main monitors, the entire room gasped. Some muttered, others swore softly, stunned. But Marcus Vale didn't move. He didn't clap. He didn't speak. He stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, staring at the girl at the terminal, not as a curiosity, but as something larger. His directors whispered behind him. Engineers glanced at each other in disbelief. One manager paced in circles like someone waking from a fever dream. But Marcus? He never looked away. Her name was Leah. No last name, no records, no digital footprint beyond a passing mention in a maintenance roster. A janitor's daughter. And yet, here she sat, facing a machine that no one else could unlock. With hands too small to span the keyboard, she had answered the question none of them could solve. Not with strength, not with luck, but with understanding. She had entered the code and come back out again. And Marcus Vale, a man who had built an empire on data, efficiency, and risk mitigation, didn't know what to think. He said nothing as she stepped back from the terminal, clutching her battered notebook to her chest like a shield. She didn't look at anyone, not even when Elias gently placed his trembling hand on her shoulder. Someone handed her a bottle of water. Someone else muttered about informing the board. But Marcus said nothing. He turned and walked out, silent, his mind louder than any explosion. He made his way back to his office like a man retracing an old road. His shoes felt heavier than usual, and his fists stayed clenched tighter than he realized. Once inside, he shut the door. With a glance, he dismissed his assistant. Alone, Marcus opened the secure video archive and pulled up the security footage. The file had already been flagged. Leia's terminal session had been automatically bookmarked. He scrubbed through the feed, watching her small frame at the console, still and focused. Then, without hesitation, he deleted the footage. But he didn't look away. Frame by frame, he watched her. Squinting eyes pressed lips, fingers dancing not like a child pretending to type, but like a calm, seasoned technician executing a precise operation. He paused and zoomed in on her face. It wasn't what she was doing that stunned him. It was how utterly composed she was while doing it. That's when the memory returned. One he hadn't touched in decades. He tried to push it away, as he always did, but it rose like smoke from the past. A dirt road outside the old Aveline orphanage. A little girl, maybe 8, maybe 9, sitting on the steps with a broken radio in her lap, fingers stained with grease as she twisted wires in silence. She never spoke, but she waited there every day. Marcus had passed her after school, after errands. She had no family, no future, but once she told him, "If I can fix the radio, maybe I can hear voices from a better place." One afternoon, the radio lit up in her hands. She didn't flinch, she smiled. And then, one day, she was gone. No note, no warning, no goodbye. He never asked what happened. He didn't want to know. He had told himself, back then, that forgetting was power, that survival meant cutting ties to anything that couldn't follow him forward. But now, watching Leah frozen in the static glow of a paused video feed, something inside him cracked. Her shoulders, the way she didn't flinch under pressure. It wasn't just brilliance. It was familiarity. Marcus leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of his mouth, the image of Leah etched onto the dark screen. He was not used to being shaken. He had survived boardroom coups, media storms, billion-dollar breakdowns. But nothing in his world had prepared him for the sight of this child, silent, unknown, untrained, doing what his elite team could not. She hadn't done it for credit. She hadn't done it for money. She did it because she could. And now it wasn't just about what she had done. It was about what it meant. How had he become the kind of man who nearly ordered security on a girl whose intelligence outpaced his entire division? How had he learned to evaluate people by job titles, resumes, and LinkedIn profiles, only to forget that genius often wears the quietest face? He felt sick, not entirely from guilt, but from realization. Somewhere along the road to power he had amputated the child inside him, the one who once believed in the impossible. And she had brought it back, not with words, with keystrokes. He replayed the footage. Slower this time. Watching her not as a tech executive but as a man decoding. He stopped at one frame, her hands lightly resting on the terminal edge, fingers curled as if she were listening to the system breathe through the steel. He thought of the girl on the orphanage steps, the one who fixed a broken radio, the one no one asked about, the one who vanished. Will Leah disappear too, he wondered, once this moment passes? Will anyone fight to keep her visible? He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in years, Marcus Vale wanted one. His chest tightened. Marcus knew exactly what the world would do if it ignored her. It would bury her genius in silence, in poverty, in paperwork. They'd thank her, maybe even applaud her for a day. Then they'd forget. Unless he refused to let them. Unless he stepped forward, not as a CEO, but as a man who once watched a gifted child vanish because no one bothered to care. Leah had cracked his system, but more than that, she had cracked him. Now, sitting in the comfort of his office, surrounded by everything he once thought mattered, Marcus Vale was haunted by a single question. What do you do when a child walks in and dismantles the world you built? He stared at the frozen videos still. Her face, her hands, her posture. Unreadable yet unmistakably known. The next morning she was called back. Not with limousines, not with cameras. Just a quiet message passed through an evening supervisor to her mother. Leah didn't ask why. She simply nodded and prepared the only way she knew, slipping her notebook into her backpack, checking that her old worn-out shoes still held together. She wore the same hoodie, sleeves sliding past her wrists, making her look smaller than she was. This time her mother didn't walk her in. She just stood at the entrance, lips pressed tight, eyes full of worry, watching her daughter walk alone through the glass doors. A polite assistant led Leah into a quiet room. Long table, one green chair. No fanfare, no bright smiles. The tone had changed. They didn't treat her like a child anymore. They treated her like something rare, something they didn't quite understand. She sat in the green chair. The room smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and fresh paint. It didn't bother her. That was a familiar scent, her mother's scent after every shift. One by one, a few key people filed in. Elias was already there, notebook in hand, offering a smile that softened her shoulders. An older woman with cropped hair and square glasses asked the first question bluntly. How did you do it? Leah blinked. What part? A few light chuckles followed, not mocking, but amused, impressed. The override, another clarified. The subcheck integration. All of it. Leah gripped her pencil tight. Anxiety stirred, the kind that came when adults asked questions they didn't really want answered. But this time they were listening. She looked around and said simply, I don't know how to explain it in words. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was open. So she slowly reached into her backpack, pulled out her notebook and flipped to a clean page. But I can show you. The pencil moved with ease, her hands guiding it like it was an extension of thought. What she drew wasn't exactly a schematic, not exactly code. It was insect-like branching like circuits, looping like rivers, colored like weather patterns. She connected components with abstract symbols that only she understood. No labels, no explanations. Just creation. When she finished, she slid the page across the table. No one moved for a moment. Then Marcus, arms crossed, face unreadable, reached for it. He didn't ask what it meant. He turned it slightly, eyes narrowing, not like an executive, but like a man trying to hear something buried beneath the surface. Leah watched him, not hoping for praise, as hoping to be understood. He flipped through a few more pages. Slowly, carefully, until something made him stop. His hand froze at the edge of the page. Leah saw the change in his shoulders. Not large, but unmistakable. He had seen it. Not just the drawing, but the mind behind it. A map, not of the system's flaws, but of how she thinks. Not lines of logic, but the shape of her understanding. She had handed them her way of seeing, and Marcus recognized it. The others leaned forward, sensing the moment. Not fully understanding it, but knowing it mattered. Leah recognized it too. Marcus wasn't analyzing anymore. He was remembering. Something flickered in his eyes. Not awe, not surprise. Recognition. She shifted in her seat, unsure what to do. She hadn't meant for this to happen. She hadn't expected silence, not like this. A silence of disbelief. The silence of adults trying to absorb something bigger than their vocabulary allowed. She reached for the notebook and stopped. Because, Marcus finally looked up. His expression softened, not out of pity but understanding. He didn't say thank you. He didn't nod. He simply tapped one finger on the sketch. This loop, what do you call it? She blinked. It doesn't really have a name. It's just how I stop the structure from collapsing when everything breaks. He nodded. That's exactly what you did yesterday. He slid the page back toward her. Keep it, don't change a thing. She tucked it back into the notebook like nothing happened. But inside, her heart thundered. She hadn't just solved a problem. She had said something, and for once, someone listened. Marcus saw that drawing for what it truly was, not a solution to a system, but a doorway to her. He had known it broke every rule. He knew it when he told the driver to take the hill road instead of the highway. He'd refused the black SUV, refused the security escort, refused the script his assistant had tried to hand him. He didn't want a document. He wanted a door. The one no one in his boardroom had dared to walk through. The one that led here, the narrow alley, the rusted gate. A mother holding a broom, eyes wide. Are you Mr. Vale? She asked, half whisper, half shock. Her instinct wasn't pride, it was panic. Did she do something wrong? She did everything right, Marcus said gently. I just came to see her world. Leah didn't run to greet him. She didn't seem surprised. She sat on the floor, a tray of tangled wires and busted resistors in front of her. She looked up and held out a broken radio. Can you fix it? She asked. No greeting, no ceremony, just a challenge, honest and pure. Marcus took the radio, feeling the weight of silence in his hands. It's been a while, he admitted. Then try, she said, handing him a screwdriver. Like a baton passed between runners. He bent down, knees aching more than he'd like, and began to work. Leah said nothing, just watched. Her mother stood nearby, unsure whether to step in. Then a boy ran out of the back room, fork in one hand, empty plate in the other. "Is there more?" "Next batch, Mario," Leah called out. "That's your brother?" Marcus asked. "Cousin," she replied. "He lives here now, we all do." The mattress against the wall, the plates in the dish bucket, the toothbrushes by the door. It all made sense. As Mario singed the pancake edges, and her mother explained that only one stove burner worked, Marcus sat in the corner, cradling a broken radio and feeling more grounded than he had in years. Leah knelt beside Mario, pointing at a capacitor on a tiny board. "If the charge is too low," she said, "it won't reverse signal properly. You need matching resistance." He loved that space. Engineers brought her snacks. Interns asked for her opinion. Department heads walked by, pretending not to glance in, though they always slowed down. She didn't perform. She didn't hold meetings. She simply worked, and in doing so, changed the very way they defined work. Slowly, perspectives shifted. Not just how they saw her, but how she began to see herself. She wasn't peeking into someone else's world anymore. She was building a new one from within. When she proposed a reworking of the company's data protocol, it was implemented. When she spotted flaws in third-party security software, vendors rewrote their code. But none of that changed who she was when she went home. She still collected broken toys on her walk from the bus stop. Still dismantled discarded radios, lifted the bones of old machines as if they held forgotten stories. Her mother no longer asked if she was tired. She just set down a mug of warm tea beside her daughter and let her work in peace. Their apartment hadn't grown larger, but something in the air had. A sense of quiet power, of unspoken recognition. Leah didn't talk much about Virion at home. Not because she didn't want to, but because some things feel too sacred to describe. Her mother understood. Every night she placed Leah's badge in the top drawer like it was a relic, something holy. Back at the office, Marcus changed too, though he would never admit it outright. His schedule remained full. His calendar still ran in color-coded blocks measured by the minute. But his office had shifted. The most noticeable change? A small frame on the corner of his desk. Inside was Leah's original sketch, the one she had passed across the table all those months ago. Loops, trees, circuits, scribbles in pencil. He hadn't scanned it or archived it. He framed the real thing, folded corners and all. During board meetings or tense negotiations, he'd find his eyes drifting toward it. It reminded him not just of her, but of the truth he'd nearly forgotten. That wisdom doesn't always arrive in suits. That leadership doesn't always speak out loud. Sometimes, without any reason at all, Marcus would walk down to the lab, pretend to check a monitor, pretend he needed a file. Leah would glance up, give him a small nod, then return to her work. She never asked why he came. He never explained. But they both understood. Sometimes, just being close is enough. Just knowing someone else understands what you're made of is enough. And despite everything that changed, despite the headlines, the media interest, the blog posts trying to name her, Leah never chased the spotlight. When a journalist asked her for a quote, she simply said, "I just like fixing things." That was Leah. Never chasing recognition. Always chasing the next pattern. The next flaw that needed a different kind of logic. She found them on paper napkins, in software logs, in the misbehavior of glitchy AIs. She kept filling her notebook, page after page, with solutions to questions no one had even thought to ask. And then, one late evening, long after the others had gone home and the lab lights dimmed into sleepy glows, Leah walked quietly into Marcus's office. Her notebook was tucked under one arm. He wasn't there, off to a dinner meeting with investors. She didn't wait. She gently laid a single piece of torn paper on his desk. Just 7 words, handwritten in small, deliberate strokes. "Thank you for meeting me, really, Salmi." Marcus returned a few hours later, expecting only the usual late-night silence. But when he turned on the desk light, the note was waiting, right beside her original drawing. He sat down slowly, unfolded the paper, and read it. Then read it again. His hands didn't move, his eyes stung. There was no one around to witness the moment, and he was quietly grateful for that. For the first time in years, maybe decades, he didn't feel like the system he'd built defined him. It was Leah, the girl who didn't ask permission, who didn't beg for validation, the girl who broke through the firewall, not just digitally but humanly. She had reminded him of what it means to create something real. Not just programs, not just policies, but trust and recognition. He sat there, the note still open in his hand, letting the moments stretch, letting the walls around him bend just a little. And for once, he didn't feel alone. Somewhere in that glass tower, a girl with oil-stained fingers and a second-hand hoodie dreamed of constellations, and deep down she knew she belonged here. We're a small team behind this channel, and every story you see here is made with heart, thought, and purpose. If this one touched you, moved you, stayed with you, consider subscribing. Your support means the world. It helps us continue bringing stories like Leah's into the light. And we'd love to hear from you. What part of Leah's journey moved you most? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to give it a like and explore the other stories we've poured our hearts into. Thank you for being here. Marcus remained seated long after Leah had gone, her simple note resting in his palm like a seed pressed into soil. Those 7 words, "Thank you for meeting me," really saw me, echoed louder than any boardroom pitch or keynote speech. In the quiet that followed, something profound took root. This wasn't just about mentorship or redemption. It was about something deeper, our moral compass. Leah's story isn't merely inspirational, it's transformational. She didn't change the company with force, fame, or financial leverage. She changed it with grace, intelligence, and the unshakable quiet of someone who knows their worth. This is where the real heart of the story lies, in the restoration of human values. In a world that increasingly rewards visibility over virtue, Leah's journey reminds us of the goodness that thrives unseen. She doesn't seek recognition, but recognition finds her. And not because of media attention, but because of merit. Marcus, once a man obsessed with numbers and optics, rediscovers humility. He learns that leadership is not about always being right. It's about learning who you've failed to see. Leah teaches him, and us, that dignity does not come from title, background, or credentials. It comes from how we treat others, especially those we overlook. Her mother, too, becomes a figure of quiet moral strength. In her silence, she creates space for Leah's voice. In her stillness, she gives Leah freedom. No lectures, no punishments, only trust, presence, and patience. The steaming cup of tea placed beside a working child becomes a stronger symbol of belief than any plaque on a wall. It tells us that love doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it simply listens. Leah's transformation of the corporate world is not measured in profit. It's measured in values, inclusion, empathy, faith in hidden potential. What she disrupts is not just code. It's the mindset that says talent must look or sound a certain way. She reminds us that there is honor in curiosity, that asking new questions is just as powerful as answering the old ones. In that sense, Leah is not just a technician. She's a moral architect. She redesigns not only the firewall but also the frame through which others view genius. Her story teaches us that brilliance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up in a child with patched sleeves and big questions. And sometimes it saves more than systems, it saves people from cynicism. The badge Marcus hands her becomes more than an access card. It becomes a covenant, a promise that the door will stay open for others like her. In doing so, he reclaims a part of himself. A part that once believed in building for meaning, not just market share. Leah doesn't lecture anyone. She doesn't stand on a podium. She simply exists, with conviction. And that becomes enough to change everything. Her impact reaches beyond the glass walls of Virion. It enters classrooms, where teachers now look twice at the quiet student. It enters living rooms, where parents notice how their children disassemble toys not in destruction, but in discovery. It enters conversations, where people begin to ask, what other systems are we overlooking? Who else have we failed to see? That is the power of stories grounded in moral truth. They do not fade, they ripple. Marcus, in embracing his discomfort, models a different kind of masculinity, one rooted not in dominance but in discernment. He doesn't save Leah. She saves the best part of him, to the part that had stopped believing in change, the part that remembered how to hope. Hope, after all, is not about certainty. It's about choosing to plant seeds you may never see bloom. That's what Leah does. She becomes the seed and the soil, and her mother the gardener. Together, they prove that miracles don't need magic. They need care, space, and the courage to break what's broken in order to build something better. Leah's story is not just fiction, it's a compass, one that reminds us to look to the quiet, to listen to the overlooked, and to believe in the unpolished. In every company boardroom, every classroom, every home, there is a Leah waiting to be seen, waiting to be believed. The true legacy of this story will not be in what Marcus built. It will be in who Leah becomes, and who gets to follow in her footsteps. Not just because she saved a company, but because she taught us what it means to see one another, to believe that goodness, even when quiet, is still the most powerful force we have. That's not fair, Mario groaned. I don't even know what resistance is. Then learned, she said flatly. That's how I did it. And across the table, Marcus Vale finally smiled. Not the smile of a CEO, but of a man who had just remembered how to believe in impossible things. Marcus didn't interrupt her. He just stood there, taking it all in. No toys, no screens, no distractions. The living room was a chaotic symphony of salvaged wires, spiral notebooks full of sketches, broken fans, and gutted DVD players. Everything had been used, reused, and learned from. What he'd seen back at the station hadn't been polished precision. It had been survival. Not panic, not fear, but a kind of focused defiance. She was building things from scraps, and yet never afraid to make them move. After his third failed attempt to reconnect a stubborn transistor, he finally spoke. "Where did you learn to do all this?" he asked, holding up a phone panel that looked far beyond saving. Leah barely looked up. "I didn't," she replied. Someday it just started to make sense. It's like math, only it sparked. Her aunt, busy watching Mario bang around the kitchen, added, "He didn't even know what a diode was 2 weeks ago. Now he tests for polarity like it's nothing." "It was just once," Mario yelled from the kitchen. "A really big spark," Leah muttered. Marcus laughed. Actually, he really laughed, for the first time since this entire storm began. It caught him off guard. He didn't wait for someone to teach him, Marcus said, more to himself than to her. He just kept going. Leah shrugged. "I had to." Her voice wasn't bitter, just matter-of-fact. He didn't say it with complaint. She didn't even seem to realize how strange it was to be so young, so unassuming, yet so far ahead. That's what moved him most. She didn't behave like someone who'd been wronged. She behaved like someone who'd accepted the terms and quietly rewritten them. Over plates of slightly burnt pancakes, Marcus looked around. Cracked brick walls, dangling wires, a ceiling fan that hummed but didn't turn. And yet, it wasn't poverty that struck him. It was clarity. Every surface served a function. Every object was a puzzle piece waiting to be fit. She had built a laboratory out of junk, a classroom out of silence, and, most miraculously, she'd done it all without slipping into bitterness. No resentment, no craving for praise, just a quiet thirst to understand the world. Leah handed him a page from her notebook. It had little pancakes doodled in the margins, but in the center was a circuit diagram. "I figured out how to store electricity without batteries," she said. "For emergencies." Marcus blinked. He didn't know how to respond to a child who'd translated spark and steel into her own private language. All he knew was what he felt. A sharp pang of guilt. A deep awe. and the aching realization that the system hadn't just missed her, it had never even known to look. She had outgrown invisibility. She had bloomed through concrete. That night, Marcus left Leah's house with something lodged inside his chest that wouldn't dislodge. It followed him into his car, into his office, and into the lifeless boardroom where his legal team droned on about liability clauses and public statements. He didn't hear a word. All he could picture was a circuit drawn on the edge of a pancake recipe. The next morning, before his staff had even clocked in, he rewrote the company's entire internship policy. No more age limits. GPA minimums gone. Background checks became optional. Digital portfolios encouraged, not required. He didn't wait for approval. He didn't need to. He was the final signature. But that wasn't enough. Later that afternoon, he called legal again, this time to set up a scholarship, not for elite private school prodigies. Unfortunately for minds like Leah's, raw, unseen, brilliant in all the places the system refused to look. And in one unexpected move, he renamed the company's rebuilt firewall. Not after a product or a team. He called it Elia the Guardian, a silent tribute to the girl who'd stabilized a crisis better than any grown man in the room. But even that didn't feel complete. The gesture was real. It was necessary. But it wasn't personal enough. Because what Leah had handed them wasn't just a fix. It was a mirror. A reminder of something Marcus had buried deep beneath years of strategy and success. And no policy, no scholarship, no press release could answer that. It had to come from him. Leah didn't answer right away. She just looked up at Marcus and asked, "Are you still allowed to break things?" He paused, then gave the first genuine smile he'd allowed himself in years. "That's how we find out what's inside," he replied. Months passed, not with press releases or grand announcements, but with quiet purpose. The kind of purpose that doesn't fade. Leah became a part of Virion not as a symbol, not as a charity case, but as a real presence. Every morning she still rode the bus with her mother, sitting silently beside her in the front row, sharing more in silence than most people could with words. Her hoodie was the same, though its elbows had been mended with careful stitches. Her single notebook had now grown into a second volume, thicker, more densely packed. Inside, diagrams, observations, unspoken ideas. Schematics of devices no one had asked her to build, questions no one else thought to ask. At Verion, she had her own access badge now, white background, red border, printed with Leah M. No last name. It wasn't needed anymore. Her workstation wasn't a private office, but no one dared touch it. Above her screen, someone had scrawled Leah's brain in dry erase marker. No one ever claimed it. Never erased it.